Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of Kintsugi Talks. My name is Soroya, and today's episode is part 2 of me talking about my diagnosis journey story. Now, for a quick recap, for those that probably didn't listen to the second episode, I actually encourage you to go back and listen to the second episode before listening to this episode so that you can be caught up. But without further ado, let's get started. Around this point in my life in the year of 2015 to 2016, I was already heavily involved in the ministry of my former church. I was a worship leader in the choir. I was a Bible class teacher. I was technically, I didn't consider myself to be a youth leader, but I was technically considered one, even though I didn't have all the actual roles of a youth leader. I was just in a lot of the services and was connected to a lot of what the youth leaders were doing. Now, in 2016, I actually became homeless. I was homeless for 2 years. That could be a story for another episode, sorry. And that is when the depression really took over, along with my first diagnosis of cancer. That is also another story for another episode. The type of cancer that I had was B-cell acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And I actually had it 3 times. Now, in the year of 2016, at that point, it had been a few years since my last suicide attempt. And at that point, I realized, okay, there is something deeper here. There is something wrong here that I should get some help for, some medical help for. So I made the decision to voluntarily admit myself into the hospital. This was in November of 2016, and I stayed there for 2 weeks. It was actually 2 weeks before my birthday, because my birthday is at the end of the month of November 30th. Now, when I came out the hospital, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. And I was also starting a medication which I currently am not taking because it actually increased my suicidal ideations, which, fun fact for those that don't know, medication doesn't work all the time. Medication is like trying to find the right pair of shoes that go with the outfit. Trying to find medication that goes for the right person. It takes a very, very long process. So the day of that, I actually exited the hospital and I was actually walking back to the shelter. I received a call from a friend of mine who we were also both members on the worship team. They called me and asked me where I had been, because I actually didn't let a lot of people know in the church that I was in the hospital. Why? Because of shame. I didn't want people to know that I went to the hospital because I tried to kill myself, rather that I had just got sick and I needed some extra attention. But then again, I didn't even want people knowing that either, because there was a gossip issue in my former church that I noticed. There was always some type of gossip, always some cliques, groups of people that always like to be around each other, and I didn't like that. I didn't want to be a part of that or a part of their conversation, so I didn't want a lot of people knowing. Only the people who I was actually super, super close with knew that I was in the hospital. But back to what I was saying with the friend that called me. They had asked me where I've been. I decided to tell them everything. And long story short, this person said, well, girl, you're Christian. You need to pull yourself together. You're a worshiper. You shouldn't be going through this, and yada, yada, yada. And that was, of course, the encouragement that I needed to hear after staying in the hospital for 2 weeks and not having support from my family, because my family said the exact same words that person said to me. They told me that I was grown and that I needed to learn how to handle my emotions. And I hope that you know that I said that in the most sarcastic way possible. So, me dealing with that and me deciding to just jump right back into church like nothing ever happened, because me being in the ministries that I was in, that was my escape from dealing what I was dealing with in church and outside of church. And what I mean by in church was that I decided to talk to a few people that I thought I could trust with information in regards to emotions, strong emotions I was dealing with, strong thoughts I was dealing with, and just wanting some guidance. And the guidance that I got was, you're dealing with the spirit of iniquity. You need to fast. You need to pray more. Pretty much all these things that were said to me make me feel like that I wasn't being a good enough Christian or that I did something wrong. Now, obviously, looking back now, I know I didn't do anything wrong. But at that time, I didn't know any better. And so a lot of guilt and a lot of shame I allowed myself to feel towards myself. So I did extra fast whenever they told me to fast. I went to every altar call and allowed anyone to just lay their hands on me and pray for me. I just beat myself up for every little thing because I wasn't getting better. Yet I was doing all this praying and all this spiritual work that I was supposed to be doing, that was supposed to help me feel better. And that made me feel like worse and worse of a Christian. Now, at this time, this is when my eyes started to get open to how things in my former church were starting to go. One of them being how ministry went, along with how people were acting in the church, and I didn't like it. I also started to feel myself being burnt out when it came to me being a part of ministry, and also the fact, like how I said, I was using me being in ministry as an escape to where I couldn't feel God anymore like how I used to. And so that's when I went to God in my own personal time and I said, okay, this isn't okay. My relationship with you has changed and I don't like it. I need to take some type of break because I need to get you and me back on track. I need to get me and God back in order. So that is what I did. I decided to take a break from teaching, Bible class teaching, and I decided to take a break from actually going to service. Like bit by bit. It went from like me not attending one service here to me not going there for like every other week to me just like not showing up at all. Now, one day, it was a day where there was supposed to be service. I received a call from someone who was a part of the worship team, and they were also part of the sound crew. Like they worked in the sound booth to make sure like the microphones are working, the lights were working, the slides were on the correct thing, and things of that nature. So they called me, and I hadn't talked to them that much on the phone, and so I'm thinking, oh, they're probably calling to check in on me, to see how I'm doing, like things that a friend would do, But I was sadly mistaken. They only called me to see if I was going to show up to service to lead, because I was apparently scheduled to lead, and there was no one else that wanted to lead the specific song that I was supposed to sing. That is the only reason they called me. And that is when I knew I couldn't be a part of that church anymore. So I made that decision right then and there, along with prayer, of course, to leave. Now, what I didn't expect to happen was for me to not attend the church at all for 3 years. Yes, 3 years. But the 3 years didn't go to waste. The 3 years I spent a lot of time with just me and God. There was a lot of fasting, proper fasting. There was a lot of digging into the word like I had it before. Really getting my intimacy back with God, like how I had in the beginning of me deciding to have a relationship with God. And those 3 years was a time well spent that I definitely needed. And I, of course, had to work through church hurt and forgiving people who said things and did these things to me that affected my mental health. And I can now say that I have forgiven those people. Now, in 2019, I was on Instagram one day and I see that a friend that I follow was following this church that was in Brooklyn. Oh, and by the way, in 2018, I came out of homelessness and I got a studio apartment in Brooklyn, which is where I live now. Now, back to the story. So I see that a friend is following this church that is in Brooklyn and it's not that far from me. So I decided to follow the church page on Instagram. So I said, okay. Then about 2 to 3 days later, I have a dream that I am at the church. Now, mind you, I've never seen a picture of what the building looked like. I never knew what the inside of it looked like. I had a dream that I was there. And it was like I was there for a service. I was there for like the worship, watching them worship, listening to the word, talking to people and stuff like that. And so I said, okay, God is definitely telling me that I need to go visit this church. So that following Sunday, I go to visit the church. And the first person that I am greeted by when I enter the doors of the church is the pastor himself, which took me for a loop because it was something that I was not used to. Now, this is not to say that the pastor in my former church was not like a kind, caring person. I'm not saying anything like that at all. It's just, it was different. There was just this level of compassion and warmth that I haven't felt before, that I haven't felt in a while. Because when you're used to having a pastor that, again, and it's not that they didn't care for the congregation, but a pastor who was very busy, more so dealing with people who lead the ministries and stuff, more than having like one-on-one conversations with the regular people who are part of the congregation. That's kind of like what you're used to. And so to have someone like a pastor come up to you and ask you, oh, did it take you long to get to church today? Like, where are you from? What's your name? And do you know anyone here? Is it your first time here? Like, I hope you enjoyed the service today. Like, it was very intimate, and it showed that they like truly cared. Not for the fact that you just showed up to church, or that didn't even really care like if you were thinking of joining the church, just the fact that you showed up. The fact that you took the time out of your day to show up. That was what really stood out to me. And from there was other people who came up to me, who were part of the congregation, who introduced themselves to me, and they even offered to sit next to me because they saw that I was new and they wanted me to feel comfortable, which I greatly appreciated. They didn't have to do that, but they chose to do that. And then the service started. The service started with the worship. And then in the middle of the worship, I realized, I kid you not, this really happened. I realized that the songs they were singing were the exact songs that they were singing in my dream of me attending the church. And that's not all. The word that the pastor gave was the exact word for word, the exact preaching that he gave in my dream. If that ain't God, then I do not know, truly do not know what is. In that moment, I knew this is my church. This is my new church home. This is it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Like, there was no way that I could question God about that. Like, the fact that literally I had a dream about visiting that church before I even went to the church. It was the exact songs that they were singing for the worship set, the exact preaching that the pastor gave word for word. Like, that was it. That was all the confirmation that I needed. God didn't even have to say anything. He said everything through showing me the dream. And so since August of 2019, I have been a member of Bridge Church NYC, and I am now part of the worship team there, and I love every bit of it. I share my story to say that God works in his own ways, or like the saying goes, God works in mysterious ways. And I also say this to say that my mental health, me dealing with my depression and anxiety, it did not get better shortly after finding a new church home. It actually got worse. And in regards to the things that I knew already about depression and anxiety, I realized that there was just some things that weren't adding up with specific things I was dealing with. So I decided to reach out to a psychiatrist, and I asked her if she could give me an evaluation, because from previous psychiatrists I was given the diagnosis of depression and anxiety, but I felt like there could be something more. And for anyone, no matter what you deal with, I strongly urge you that if you feel like you are dealing with something more than the original diagnosis you were given with, or you feel like you're getting the wrong treatment, find the right treatment for you, because you're doing it for you. I strongly urge you to obviously seek medical professional help. Find the right doctor for you, find the right medication for you, find the right psychiatrist, therapist for you. Because in the end, this stuff is helping you help yourself. Now, back to me going to the psychiatrist. I told them like how I just felt like depression and anxiety wasn't the only stuff I was dealing with. So she does evaluations with me, and she really took her time with the evaluations, because there was the two different diagnoses that she landed on was bipolar disorder and borderline personality disorder. Now, for those people who are probably listening out there who have diagnosis of either one of these disorders, will know how tricky of a thing it is, because these two disorders have literally the same symptoms. And that is what makes it very hard and difficult of a process, very tricky of a process, to even diagnose someone with one of these disorders, because again, they have the same symptoms. What makes it different is the frequency of when someone's manic episodes or mood swings come about. Now, manic episodes are episodes when the person has this great sense of euphoria, this great sense of confidence. They feel like they can conquer the world, they can do anything that they want, nothing can stop them. And this comes with a lot of reckless behaviors. Spending money that they shouldn't be spending. Reckless sex, reckless drinking, reckless substance abuse in general, reckless driving, and a lot more of an agitated behavior and very, very, very intense mood swings. Now, for someone with bipolar disorder, this can happen over the span of a few days. And then with someone with borderline personality disorder, this can happen over the span of a few minutes. And with careful consideration and with careful evaluating, my psychiatrist found that I fit more with the diagnosis of borderline personality disorder than with bipolar disorder. And since then, I have been giving a medication that has been working pretty decently for me so far. I have 2 therapists, one that is a CBT therapist, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and one that is a DBT therapist, which is a dialectal behavioral therapy. Now, those 2 type of therapy is similar, but they're also very different. The one difference I will say is the amount of work that you do. Now, there are some therapists that actually like to give like assignments or homework to their clients, which I personally don't mind. I actually kind of like it because it helps me to put more into practice what I'm being taught to better help regulate my emotions. Now, DBT does give you a lot more assignments than CBT, so that is what I'll say the main kind of difference is. To end all this, I would like to say that you can have Jesus and therapy. You can have Jesus and a psychiatrist, Jesus and a therapist, Jesus and medication. I am a firm believer that God did not intend for the darkness that came into this world when He first created the world. It happened with the fall of man. Now, that doesn't mean that, everything is messed up now, God doesn't know what to do. Of course, God knows what to do because He always has a plan and He is able to work through everything and anything. And with what comes with a dark world comes with people who will develop mental illnesses, mental disorders, mood disorders, things of that nature. And He is able to move in that through, like I said, medication, therapy, psychiatrists, different doctors, science. And I know that God is moving through my life through all of those things that I have in my life. And I am grateful for that. And of course, God Himself is doing things in my life. He is giving me more patience to be able to deal with myself, more grace for myself, more knowledge in how to even regulate my emotions. And all of these things that He is showing me Himself fall in line with things that I am reading in the Bible and also learning in therapy. So it goes to show that people should not be shamed for the fact that they are even seeking medical help if they are a Christian. And the shame and guilt and stigma that is still in the Christian space when it comes to mental health, mental illness, things of that nature needs to stop. Also, me having borderline personality disorder, me having depression, me having anxiety, I may never get better from it. Or how the spiritual people would like to say, I might never get free from it. You know why? Because God doesn't have to heal me from anything. And I believe that God will have me live with this diagnosis for however long He wants me to live with it, to show people that, hey, she's living with this and she's living proof that God can still get the glory through it. God can still get the glory through her diagnosis, through her taking medication, through her having a psychiatrist, through her having 2 therapists, through her having a community of people that God has specifically placed to show that, hey, you are not alone in this, and I will stand with you and I will help you carry your burden with you. God can do that. And I know that if He can do it for me and is currently doing it for me, that He could do it out there for every single person who is in a similar situation, whether they are a Christian or not. Well, that is it for today's episode. Again, this was part 2 of my diagnosis journey story. And for those that have shown so much love so far for just even starting this podcast or for the last episode, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your love and appreciation does not go unnoticed, and I pray for every single one of you guys, and the prayers and support you have shown to me again is just, it's overwhelming in the best way possible. I can't wait for you guys to hear the next episode after this one. I won't tell you what it's about, so you're gonna have to subscribe to wherever you're listening to my podcast on. And until then, God bless.